a part of all of it. Of course, busy day for us as well. It's SEC Country Live coming up 3 p.m. Eastern time today, and Jeff will have his recruiting show before the Hedges presented by Kroger later on tonight. But for now, we're going to think about continuing to make the case why I think, even with a big point spread on Saturday, I think Georgia's a team to like against the Gamecocks for a lot of little reasons. I think the Dogs are pretty motivated. I'm mostly, having fun with this, but I still am going to try to make my case about this over the course of the next couple of days. So we'll do that again today. We'll get deep into the quarterback situation about what's going on there with JT Daniels and Carson Beck and Stetson Bennett and kind of how that order may go on Saturday when we might see JT Daniels again. But we're going to begin this way. A reporter who covers South Carolina shared a stat this week that I think speaks to the fact that the Gamecocks could be in some real trouble on Saturday against the Georgia Bulldogs. No matter how much Kirby Smart may try to downplay this, it may just be as obviously true as ever. So we'll talk about that to begin things as DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Harrah's Cherokee Resort. Find us online at Caesars.com/Harrah's-Cherokee.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Boy, so much to do today on the show. It's fun this time of year, especially when you think about Georgia fans who I thought, to my eye, sitting up in the press box, have a chance to go visit in the stadium a little bit on Saturday. To me, it looked like they were having a blast, getting a chance to be in front of 93,000 people again. Some of those friends you don't really see other than Georgia football, a lot of congregating around tailgates and everybody just enjoying the topic at hand of Georgia football, a team that's 2-0 and riding pretty high right now. And I would say that on Saturday, all that's going to be taken up to the next level there as well, because not only is it a chance to be back between the hedges again, it's also a night game. The light show always looks really good as they're popping and flashing and doing all that kind of stuff. And there's just a little extra juice for these SEC games at night. So as South Carolina comes into Sanford Stadium on Saturday, that's on my mind a little bit. We're going to continue to talk about that game over the course of our time together. And listen, I have the freedom on this show to say some things that if you actually work in the football building at UGA, you can't say. In fact, if I ever heard Kirby Smart or a Georgia player say some of the things that I say, I'd be pretty bothered by them. There's a big difference in what I do and what they do. I can say whatever I want because I talk for a living, right? The Georgia players and coaches, as Smart says, they do their talking with their helmets. They play for a living, and sometimes, what you say or you don't say could be a potential distraction on all of that, or just maybe an example of game face not where it needs to be going into a game like this. So here for a moment, I'm going to exercise my freedom to speak openly about how I think it's going to play out on Saturday. I think South Carolina is in some real trouble. And it's not because I don't have any respect whatsoever for the Gamecocks. I actually thought, fighting back and getting the win against East Carolina on the road on Saturday was probably a better win than some people give credit for. And I would never want Georgia to disrespect or disregard an opponent. That's just setting yourself up for a letdown on the field. I wouldn't want the actual team, coaches and players to do this. And if they're listening right now, just tune me out. Don't listen too closely to what I'm saying. But to the rest of us, fans, folks who'll be observing the game, we can speak openly and candidly with each other. I think that South Carolina is going to get steamrolled by Georgia on Saturday. I'm more confident about this game than I probably was the week before that against UAB. Not that I thought Georgia would lose to UAB. I just thought that UAB was a program I had some kind of quiet respect for. In the case of South Carolina right now, I don't think the matchup works very well for the Gamecocks on Saturday. I want to give you one piece of information why. There's a reporter that covers South Carolina for the big news entity up there in the South Carolina area. It's called The State. It's a newspaper that based out of Columbia. And the reporter that covers South Carolina for The State, capital T for the, of course, shared a stat this week on Twitter that I thought, oh boy, that could really be a problem for the Gamecocks. So let me read this to you for a second, and then we'll hear more from Kirby Smart on all of this. So Ben Portnoy, who covers South Carolina for The State, says South Carolina's offensive line ranks dead last. DFL, as some would say. Dead last in the SEC in pass blocking, according to Pro Football Focus. Facing an elite front seven against Georgia next week, South Carolina has to shore things up and quickly. Now, here you go. So if you're dead last in pass blocking when you faced Eastern Illinois and East Carolina, it is a dire set of circumstances to think that you are trying to get it right, get it fixed in time to play Georgia this upcoming Saturday. Now, to be fair here, Shane Beamer, the South Carolina coach, was asked about that Pro Football Focus stat this week, and he actually kind of basically disregarded it and said he didn't believe it was true from his perspective. And, we've had our issues before with some of the stuff that Pro Football Focus shares, and, different people feel different ways about all of that. But it's at least an eye-opening thing to suggest that any analytics body out there saying, we don't like what we're seeing from South Carolina from a pass blocking standpoint with the pass rush machine that the Georgia Bulldogs have put together through 2 weeks, coming in and getting ready to play against this Gamecocks offense in Sanford Stadium on Saturday. And what's cool about what Georgia's doing right now that's front seven are all the different guys who are doing it. Big sack totals from the Jordan Davises and the Trayvon Walkers and the Adam Andersons and the Nakobe Deans going back to the Clemson game. You saw a guy like Nazir Stackhouse get involved in that game against UAB, getting a sack, almost had another. It's just the sheer number of guys that Georgia's kind of rolling through there and getting after quarterbacks right now. And I do think it leads to a daunting task for the opposing offense that has to face that. And it's one of those things where when you play defense the way that Georgia plays, defense is actually really fun, right? I mean, there's a reason why in fantasy football, you draft all the individual offensive players, but you kind of only, at least in most leagues, only draft just one collective team defense because fans like offense better. And you can be Mr. Football and say, no, I actually like a good defensive game. I like a 13-10 game. And if that's you, then congratulations. But for the average fan, offense is just more interesting than defense. You collect football cards. Quarterbacks are the ones that have all the value. People don't really collect, football cards for the most part of outside linebackers or cornerbacks or anything like that. When it comes to like the economy around football, there's just a lot more energy around the offensive side than the defensive side. And I think that we all kind of understand why for casual fans that's true. However, I would suggest when you play defense the way that Georgia plays, boy, that's less true, right? I mean, when you're, you think about like you're sitting on your couch watching the game on TV, or in my case, up in the press box, there's that tendency you want to, jump up and go get yourself something to drink right quick, a glass of water, whatever else. Sometimes I think in, some situations, some fans may say, well, if my team doesn't have the ball, that's a good chance for me to go and, turn the burgers over on the grill or go to the bathroom or, grab a new drink or whatever else. But I can promise you this, there is no Georgia fan right now who's getting up to go do something while his team's on defense, because that's a highlight reel waiting to happen. The same way for most schools, you'd say that about the offense. The Georgia defense right now is not just impactful, but they're fun to watch because of all the ways in which they create havoc, sacking quarterbacks, tackles for loss, all of the energy that you're getting from that team right now. And yes, the secondary is still a work in progress. I totally get all of that. But boy, how great is it to be a young defensive back working your way up in that group right now, knowing that you're so well protected by the way in which the front seven, out linebackers, defensive linemen are affecting quarterbacks right now. That's a really cool thing. And as I said before, I can talk big about all of this and brag on how well they're doing. For a fact that Kirby Smart's not going to do that. For a fact that Kirby Smart, for the most part, is going to, at least publicly, ignore all the ways in which this group could be lauded and praised. Kirby Smart said during the Clemson game, you're either elite or you're not. Well, right now, this group clearly has the makings for a group that's elite, that takes seriously its opportunity to be elite. Kirby Smart's not going to be too quick to award that status as of yet. In fact, when he spoke to reporters yesterday, he went into great detail about what he still wants to see more of. He's watching the film more closely. He's grading on a tougher curve. You understand all of that. And he is not going to just toss the praise and the bouquets around the way that somebody like I might do. This is Kirby on his defense.
Improvement-wise, we really probably did not play as well in the second game, as we did in the first. We really did not strike blockers and play run fits to the standard that we expect. We did get some turnovers, which we didn't get in the first, but the biggest thing was playing our gaps, striking blockers, and communication. There's still breakdowns that we have that we're trying to get right defensively. We're fast enough and we're big enough that we haven't been exposed on some of those. And we got to do a better job of definitely playing the run.
So I take Smart very seriously on that. And as I said before, not only is that what you would expect Smart to say, most of you would say that's what I want Smart to say. I want him keeping the pedal to the metal and keeping the focus where it needs to be. I don't want him listening to, Rat Poison from BA about, how elite this is and how South Carolina can't block them and all that kind of stuff. And I totally get all of that. However, here is the one thing that I do find myself wanting to say again as a response to everything you just heard from Smart there. It's nice to see that he's kind of zeroed in on how we fitting up the run stops, how are we doing in that regard. And the truth is most of us expect Georgia to be a good rushing defense. They've been the best in the country the last couple of years. And that's really important. You want to be good stopping the run. You want to make offenses one-dimensional. You want to make, offenses fight you left-handed or right-handed, but you want to put one hand behind the back and take that running game away. And Georgia's been really good at doing that. Here's the one point I keep making over and over again, and this is one of the reasons why I'm really eager to see what this group does again on Saturday, is that I think there's this perception out there, this notion out there that Georgia is good defensively in 2021 the way that it has been the last few years. And, I just think this is a different brand of Georgia defense because Georgia has not always been great at sacking quarterbacks. Georgia has not always been great at affecting the passing game. In 2020, they took a big step towards getting better at that. Azeez Ojulari obviously helped lead the way. But I also think the mindset instilled by Dan Lanning helps create some of that too. What's fun about this Georgia defense right now is not just the fact that it's doing the fundamental things that defenses are asked to do. It's not just doing those things well, but it's also creating a level of havoc, creating a level of discomfort for quarterbacks that does make it really hard on offensive lines. And if you're struggling at all coming into the Georgia game, then you are fearful that it may be an absolute unmitigated disaster against the Dogs at the moment. That's the kind of havoc that UGA is wreaking on defense right now. It's incredibly fun to watch. I think it's impactful to the tune of contending for championships, and I think we all would say we can't wait to see where it's all going next. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Good to have you with us. Whether you're joining us at 9:45 in the morning for our 1st and 15 on the DawgNation homepage, the DawgNation app, you want to watch us live on video right there, you're going to DawgNation.com each and every day anyway. Why not kind of dial it up there at 9:45, right there above the fold at the top of the page? Just click into the video. We'll chat. We'll do some comments. We'll do some additional content on today's 1st and 15. We talked a little bit about the latest on Ira Gilbert and Karis Jackson, Dominic Blaylock, stuff we didn't have time for on the regular show. We did that as a part of our 1st and 15 this morning on DawgNation.com, the DawgNation app, so please make sure you join us. Or if you're just more comfortable watching the way you always have on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter or Twitch, we're really glad to have you doing that there too. Podcast, all the various platforms there as well, Apple, Spotify, everything in between. Of course, posting the show on the world-famous DawgNation.com. A lot of folks visit our show page at DawgNation.com. They click into that because they want to share their comments to be a part of our podcast Cooldown later on. We certainly appreciate that, too. And, of course, we appreciate our friends at Harris Cherokee Casino Resort for making all this possible. It's an easy getaway from Atlanta, just 2-hour drive from where I'm sitting right now in our palatial DawgNation World Headquarters Studios. And you can enjoy the casino gaming, obviously real table games and slot machines and all that kind of stuff. That's a lot of fun. The gourmet dining experiences there, all kinds of great restaurants. There's world-class shopping. There's a luxurious spa. But in addition to all of that, sports gaming is also legal now. They're at the Harris Cherokee Casino Resort properties. That means you can get your action down on Saturday games, on the Sunday games, on the other sports during the week. You can place legal sports wagers right now. Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, Harris Cherokee Valley River, both those properties. So to find out more about this, go to Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee. That's Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee for a lot more on that. Make sure you check out Harris Cherokee Casino Resort today. Great time for a fall getaway. Enjoy yourself as you do that. All right, it's Mike Griffith here coming up in a moment. We'll do a Georgia Farm Bureau practice report with Mike here in just a little bit. One of the things we'll get into deeply with Mike is what's going on with the quarterbacks and how the pecking order and the playing time distribution for that group here on Saturday against South Carolina may be similar or dissimilar to what we saw last week against UAB. And I've told you before that I take JT Daniels' health status pretty seriously here. Not because I know him to be seriously hurt and out for a long time, but I mentioned this morning. I did another radio interview with my friends over at 960 The Ref in Athens. And, the college football schedule is kind of a weird thing, right? You wait all year to finally get these games. And you finally have your first game. For Georgia this year was on September the 4th. and you finally have your first game. By the way, we are around the Doghouse here today as we roll into Around the Doghouse. We are Around the Doghouse, presented today by our friends at Rooms to Go. Good to have Rooms to Go with us here today for Around the Doghouse, furnishing what we're doing here. But the point that I was making is, with our friends at Rooms to Go, is that you wait all year long for the season to get here, for the schedule to get here, and then it finally arrives. September 4th was Georgia's first game. Then you blink your eyes, 2 weeks later, you're now 25% done with the regular season. That's kind of amazing. When Georgia finishes the game Saturday night against South Carolina, the regular season will be 25% of the way done. And my anticipation is JT Daniels probably will not play against the Gamecocks. That means that he's only played in one of Georgia's first 3 games, after only having played in 4 of Georgia's, 10 games a year ago? How many games it was? I think 10. Only 4 of those 10 games a year ago. That it's not an insignificant story with Daniels not playing, not because of anything other than you just want that cohesiveness to exist between him and his wide receivers. You want Georgia to be at its best offensively when it plays the games that matter the most as you head through the month of October and towards the end of the season, certainly to be firing on all cylinders by the time you get to December and what could possibly come after that. And so Daniels not playing is a deal. The biggest deal of all time, an insurmountable disadvantage for Georgia? Of course not. But it's not part of some grand master plan to have Daniels on the sidelines right now. He's getting the rest that he probably needs, but how much more of that will he need? When can he be back throwing the football comfortably? So Kirby Smart did address that yesterday, along with a little bit of a surprise update on Stetson Bennett. The name Carson Beck was used as well. This is Kirby Smart on his quarterbacks.
JT feels much better. He's continued to improve. I think he's better now than he was on Saturday. I don't know that he's 100%, but he's certainly getting closer to that. Stetson is repping, JT's repping, and Carson's repping. So Stetson's actually got some lower back issues that he strained some stuff, but he's able to go. But I don't know if he's 100%. He's been dinged up since Monday morning, but he went out and practiced as well. So they're all 3 practicing, and I wouldn't say 100. I think Carson's 100% healthy, but the other 2 are still pushing back.
I have no idea what to make about Stetson Bennett and the lower back issue. I'm not saying this is what's happening, but I'm reminded of the fact that, remember when Tom Brady played for the Patriots and every week for a decade, Brady's name was always on the injury report, and it was always, he's probable or questionable or whatever the status was, but kind of always on there that sometimes you may want to, hide some injury information. Sometimes you might want to just sort of flood the zone with injury information so that no one really knows what to pay attention to. I don't know if that's gamesmanship from Smart or what. It could be obviously taken at face value that maybe Bennett is just a little bit banged up after the UAB game from a week ago. But I mean, it's still going to be the status of Daniels that matters the most to me. And my understanding is it's really the rest here that matters more than anything else. When is he getting that rest? Is he practicing less than sometimes we're led on to believe that he is? Obviously, you think the game on Saturday could be an opportunity for him to get that rest, and does that mean that he could be back playing again in time for the Vanderbilt game? Smart's obviously not going to answer that directly, and it could be that he doesn't know directly, right? I mean, a lot of this is pain and how it impacts your ability to throw the football, but it's clearly something I've got on my mind. And as far as what all this means for Carson Beck, my guess is that Beck will be in a similar situation Saturday to what he was a week ago. That assuming that Bennett's healthy enough to play, my assumption is he will start. Clearly, he's earned the right to get a chance to do that based on what happened last week against UAB. And maybe he can do what he did a week ago, which is build a comfortable lead that then gives Georgia the freedom to play whoever it wants to, whenever it wants to. I'm not saying that's the only circumstance that would cause Beck to get in the game, but I don't get the sense that assuming Bennett's healthy, this is a 2-quarterback system on Saturday. This is a game in which Georgia's a 30-point favorite, which in typical situations in the SEC means there's chance for more than one quarterback to play. And I'm guessing if all goes according to plan, that's how that will roll out for Georgia on Saturday. But once again, as I've said before, don't get so fixated on the Bennett versus Beck distribution that you lose sight of the fact that right now Georgia's starting quarterback would appear to be not healthy enough to play, and nothing is more important than that until that situation is rectified. It is Around the Doghouse, furnished today by our friends at Rooms to Go. And obviously, there's nothing that makes you feel better, nothing that makes you prouder when you bring folks over to your home than to have a beautifully furnished house, right? Wherever you live, beautiful furnishment to make everything look the way that it's supposed to look. That's what Rooms to Go can provide for you. Whether you're talking about for the entire room, you just want that one furniture piece, you want the accent piece to kind of go along with that. Bedrooms, living rooms, obviously the outdoor stuff on the patios and everything else. Rooms to Go can do so much of that for you. For the kids. It's just really amazing the variety of options you have available to you. As I said before, whether you're looking to furnish the entire room or a portion of a room, or you just need that one finishing piece to kind of bring it all together. Rooms to Go is so good on all of that. You can stop by and visit them in a showroom today to find out more about that. You can check them out online at roomstogo.com. Of course, 2 spelled out T-O, roomstogo.com. Check them out today, and we certainly appreciate Rooms to Go furnishing around the doghouse for us here today there as well. All right, before we're done, I'm going to make my case, as I did yesterday, that I believe that Georgia's going to be a pretty motivated team against South Carolina on Saturday. I'm kind of half kidding, half serious about this, but we'll continue that conversation coming up before we are done today. But for now, on more of the quarterback situation, on kind of what else to expect against South Carolina, how the preparations are going, getting ready for the Gamecocks. Let's get a practice report from Mike Griffith, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. Good to have all of you with us here today on DawgNation Daily.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We will say hello to Mike Griffith, who obviously asked Kirby Smart the question yesterday. You just heard the answer to a moment ago with what's going on there with Daniels, and maybe a little bit of a surprise insertion about Stetson Bennett's back, and obviously Carson Beck, part of this discussion too. Mike, thanks for being here. Obviously, your appearance presented by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau here today. And let me go big picture with you first, and then we'll kind of drill down on the details after that. What do you make of where things stand with Georgia's quarterback situation based on what you heard from Kirby yesterday, what he said on Monday, maybe what he said going back to Saturday, what you've seen with your own eyes, what other people off the record are saying? What do you make of it all right now?
Murky. It's murky. We don't know. I think it's unsettled. I don't think it's determined. I think it's yet to be determined. TBA, to be announced. Kirby Smart not going to tip his hand, and some of it has to do with the condition of the guys and how they practice. Digging a little deeper, someone told me Carson Beck didn't look real good in practice last week, and that was part of what led to Stetson Bennett starting. I mean, it's the quarterback deal is kind of like a mood ring. You don't know. I mean, it's a touchy-feely thing, and Kirby's job is, win, right? What's important now, and what's important now is to, get through this game in the best manner possible. Winning the game, managing the roster, protecting the roster for a championship run. There's a lot that goes into these decisions, that go above and beyond just, play the best guy. Like, for example, I think if it was a championship game, I think JT Daniels could have played if he really needed to against UAB. But, he really didn't need to, so why not rest him and get him a little bit better, right? So, and that kind of makes me wonder how they'll manage this game. It's not as simple as it's not like the NFL where they're going to start the best guy every game because he's getting paid. It's a roster management, and you're trying to win a championship and win each game along the way. So I don't have all the information in front of me. I don't know the extent of Stetson Bennett's back injury. I don't know the extent of JT Daniels' oblique or core strain. I don't know how Carson Beck looks in practice this week and how he responds to that pick six. So without all that information in front of me, all I can do is try to interpret what the coach is saying, and he made it pretty clear that it's an open situation because of the ailments of Carson and JT, the extent of which won't be known on game day, and waiting to see how Carson Beck responds in practice this week.
So you say something there that I think is kind of interesting. You say, and obviously this is just your hypothesis, which is I'm doing the same thing too. We're both just kind of speculating on the basis of our most educated guesses. But you're saying, hey, maybe if it was Georgia playing, at Florida on Saturday, maybe JT Daniels would have been healthy enough to start, but why risk that against a UAB or potentially risk it against a South Carolina? And obviously, as a Georgia fan, I hope what you're saying is true. But boy, Mike, I can't quite be sure that that's true on the basis of my understanding of the oblique situation which I understand to be really about the pain, and pain that's aggravated when you try to go through a throwing motion, the torque that you're trying to establish with your body to throw it. And I guess the concern I would have is that it limits his ability to make all the throws he'd want to make during a game. And once again, I'm just kind of theorizing the basis of my limited understanding of all of this. And to add to that, what smart people have told me is, listen, it's really about the rest. And so my question is, well, when's he going to get that rest? Is there a chance that he's actually practicing a little less than it's sometimes let on that he is? Obviously the game situation kind of provides that rest. That, in other words, to kind of sum all this up, I'd love to believe that what you just said is true of, hey, if it was Florida, maybe JT Daniels is playing. But if he's hurt enough that it's painful to make all the throws that a quarterback needs to make in a game, including really letting it rip on some deep throws, then to me, I don't quite know that is healthy enough that he could have played had the game been bigger, had the game required his presence. I can't say that I'm confident that's true.
I can. I just told you it's true. If it was a bigger game, he could have played. That's what I've been told, and I believe it. And I believe what you're saying also, that rest is the best remedy for that. Kirby Smart said that, and Kirby told us yesterday that JT was taking reps. So I'm kind of with you. That's why I said it's murky, BA. That's why it's confusing to me. It seems like there's a lot of mixed messages out there. On the one hand, Kirby says that, or there's an indication that he's not playing against UAB because he needs to rest it, and yet he's back out there taking reps on Monday, but he's not declared the starter. So that's why I said, it's kind of maddening, and as you pointed out to me before, frustrating for fans, because if it seems like Kirby Smart is sending mixed messages, it's because he is. He absolutely is. But yes, I was told that if JT, if it was a championship for Clemson or a Florida, yeah, he could have gone. Now, to your hypothesis and speculation, I would also wonder what type of performance he would put out there. Maybe Kirby Smart did too and said, you know what? Yeah, JT could have gone, but would I rather have a Stetson Bennett at 100% or a JT Daniels that could be affected on some of these throws, right? Like I said, I'm just trying to get in the mind of the head coach. Being able to play, or what does Kirby say, being cleared to play and being ready to play are two different things. And it is a judgment call, right? If it was an emergency situation, if Stetson Bennett got hurt on the first play and Carson Beck got hurt on the second play and Brock Vandegrift got hurt on the third play, yeah, then you don't have a choice. But, you kind of weigh it. What if Stetson stinks it up and you need JT? I mean, we can hypothesize all day long. What I'm telling you is that if he had to play, if it was a championship game scenario, he could have played. Now, what would that have done to the injury? Would it have set it back? Could you have jeopardized him further into the season? Probably. And so if you're Kirby Smart, you weigh those odds. You go, why take a chance on aggravating this injury and maybe not having him for a game like Arkansas or on the road like Auburn? So let's just rest him and see if Stetson Bennett, can take care of business. So, yeah, he probably could have played. Kyrus Jackson could probably play receiver if it came right down to it. But right now, they want to rest the knee and limit him to the punt returns, right? Now, one thing we did pick up yesterday that was interesting, Brandon, was that Dominic Blaylock apparently has a hamstring injury, and he's a guy that, Kirby said they thought was closer to being ready than Kyrus, and now a little bit of a setback for Blaylock. So the quarterback situation's maddening, frustrating not to get some receivers back in the rotation for sure. I completely understand where you're coming from on this line of questioning.
All right, so let me do one more thing on quarterbacks, and then we'll change the subject. A lot of Georgia fans have made a big deal about the fact that Beck was proclaimed to be the number 2 quarterback, and yet when it came time to move the number 1 aside, it was actually Stetson Bennett that kind of seemingly overtook Beck pretty quickly in all of that. And what I have said, Mike, is, and I want your opinion on this, is that to me there's a big difference between the number 2 quarterback playing with the number 2 offense during practice with a healthy starter. That's one scenario. But when that healthy starter is no longer healthy, determining who now becomes quarterback 1 to me is a totally different type of thing, right? It's not one of those things that, like, you're not vice president. There's no constitutional line of succession here in terms of who just steps up there, that you're making a different decision. Not who runs with the number 2 offense during practice and who gets that valuable experience, but who actually utilize the experience they have to be the starting quarterback. And from that standpoint, I don't have a problem with the semantics of, well, Beck was the number 2, but Stetson Bennett was the starter. What do you make of all of that?
I think you're right. And, there's a couple ways to look at this. So the first way to look at it, Kirby's he's so devilish with his comments, Brandon. I mean, you really got to be on the ball with this guy. Carson Beck was the number 2. What we didn't know is that Stetson Bennett was the number 1. He never said who the number 1 was. All he said was Beck was the 2. And you go back and listen, and you're like, doggone it, Kirby, did you pull another fast one on us? And so that's one thing, and it's semantics, and we're all going, now come on, that's not fair. But you know what? Again, Kirby doesn't want to play his hand. He doesn't want to tell the other team what he's thinking. So in his mind, he probably said that and patted himself on the back. Yeah, Beck's number 2. They just don't know that Bennett's going to be the number 1 this week. The second thing is, to your point about, who assumes control when the number 1 goes out, I look at it more like a pitching rotation. Let's say you're in the World Series, right? You've had a number 1, 2, 3 starter all year but the matchup in the second game of the World Series tells you to go with your number 3 because he's the left-hander, and he's going up against a batting order that may be more susceptible. That's kind of how I look at it. Like, yeah, Beck is working with the 2s because he's a young guy, and you want to develop him, and he needs all those reps that he can get. But at the end of the day, Bennett's the guy that has more experience. You kind of know what you've got in him. Banked reps is the term that Kirby created. I'd never heard that one before. He called them banked reps as though there was some sort of equity from the reps he had last year. I guess there was. Look at the way Stetson, by the way, adjusted the arc on his deep passes. That was not the same guy we saw last year. He picked up a trick from J.T. Daniels on that deep ball. If you'll notice, people might be thinking, geez, why didn't Stetson have that success last year? Because his deep balls were a lot flatter. They didn't have the same amount of arc. He didn't let the receivers run underneath it. So some improvement from Stetson Bennett. I hadn't heard many people talk about that, but credit to him that even when it looked like he might just disappear off the planet, he didn't just come back. He came back with an improved passing touch. He came back as ready and as equipped as ever. I think it's a wonderful story. The way he validated himself, as I said it on Twitter, is there anyone on the planet that Stetson Bennett hasn't won over yet?
Yeah.
To the point now that I think he's a very capable option, and regardless of the situation, to the point now where if you'd have said before Stetson Bennett's got a strained back, you said, yeah, so what? Now you go, oh no, that guy looked really good. So it's for me as a writer, it's fun to write about. But to your point, you've told me this before, it's frustrating for fans because there's not a clear picture of how Kirby Smart's going to do this.
Again, and then we've also, my instruction to fans is always assume guys are more hurt than sometimes being led on. And if you do that enough, you're going to get more right than wrong in most instances. Let me just do one more thing on the quarterback real quick, even though I say we're going to move on. The other thing I think you got to add to all of this is that I don't think anything of the last 7 days makes Carson Beck any less of a prospect than he already was. I think there's a chance he's Georgia's starting quarterback of the future. I think there's also a chance that he's overtaken by someone like Brock Vandagriff. I think that's still very much an unknown right now, but the fact that he wasn't pegged as the starter on Saturday is, to me, not a significant part of Beck's long-term story going forward. The fact of the matter is, this was the second game of his second year as a college athlete. His first year was the weirdest year in the history of college football. There was no spring practice. There weren't those opportunities to grow and get better that typical quarterbacks would have had. There are a lot of quarterbacks who are very, very good who have had to wait a lot longer than Carson Beck has had to get on the football field. In fact, there are a lot of players in this current Georgia roster who are very, very good at other positions who don't want to hear about the idea that you're going to be impatient after 2 games of a second year when they had to wait 3 or 4 years to get a chance to do what they're doing right now. I'm assuming that Beck understands that. I just hope the fans that cheer for Beck also understand that, Mike.
Yeah, I agree with you that the way the game was managed doesn't say anything about his future, but I think the way he handled it raises some questions. He didn't look very dialed in to me. I didn't think he looked nearly as polished or comfortable as we saw him look in the G-Day game. And after all, it was a different situation. That's why Kirby didn't choose him. because he wasn't ready, because he hadn't been exposed to that situation. I look at the way Keely Ringo, the jump he made between game 1 and game 2. I mean, Keely looked awful in the first game on those 2 pass interference penalties, but he came back with an interception, and what a wonderful story behind that. If you'll read the story Jeff Sentels wrote this week about Keely Ringo's mother, it's on DawgNation.com. But there's great growth between game 1 and game 2. But the thing that bothered me, Brandon, I'll be honest with you, I didn't see it during the game, but when I watched the replay, when he threw the interception, he didn't pursue the tackle. And that is just not something that Georgia coaches, fans, probably not even Carson Beck himself, that's not going to happen. I mean, you remember when DJU threw that pick 6 to Christopher Smith? Part of the image was watching DJU try to chase him down. And he didn't make the play, but daggone did he come close. And, man, was he hustling down the field. And Beck didn't show you that. He acted like a 15-year NFL veteran, like, he's ready to head to this, and he just trotted. And Robert Griffin III called him out on it. It was terribly embarrassing. It was one of the more embarrassing things I've seen in an SEC game for a football player, to be outed like that by a national commentator for not hustling. And that goes against everything that Georgia and Kirby Smart preaches. So I think it was a teaching moment. I doubt that that'll ever happen again. But I do think it shows just how much growth, is left for Carson Beck. He's not ready to go. As many people, we did a DawgNation poll. I think about 90% of the people said they wanted to see him start over Stetson Bennett. And we all just assumed, because Jake Fromm looked so game ready, we just assumed that somebody's just going to step in and just be so ready to go. And it just doesn't always work that way, and that's where we have to defer to the head coach's judgment. And believe me, I'd love to be out there watching practice every day and being able to give you a report, tell you who look good, but it's just not like that. Kirby has absolute power, and he'll be the one to decide.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Georgia on Saturday, 31-point favorite against South Carolina. Have not been a favorite of 30 or more points in SEC play since September of 2018. What do you make of the Dogs being such a big favorite here in this spot?
Would that have been a Vanderbilt game, BA?
It was actually
September 2018?
Tennessee Vols, and Georgia did not cover that day for what it's worth.
Very interesting statistics there, Brandon. I don't think South Carolina is going to be able to do anything with the ball. So the question becomes, how many points does Georgia score? Because South Carolina has a very good defensive front, and also we wonder who's going to be at quarterback, and will they be able to fool South Carolina like they did UAB? I mean, part of that was just brilliant coaching from Todd Monken. The self-scout, they showed the bunch formation, they'd shown tendencies to run out of it, and so UAB's playing run. And Georgia's just got guys just running by him. It wasn't anything Jermaine Burton did great. Nobody covered him. They blew the assignment. He ran under the ball. Arian Smith, same thing. JT Daniels signaled touchdown as soon as the ball was snapped. It's blown aside. It's Monken just feasting on these, outwitting these coordinators. This is why they're at UAB and not in the SEC, right? So I don't know if he's going to be able to outfox South Carolina to that extent. I'd like to think they probably have a better coaching staff than UAB. But Monken's got some tricks, and like I've said throughout the whole offseason, this offense is designed for somebody to be open. The trick is to have the quarterback that can recognize that and the receivers that can, run the routes and catch the ball once they're open. So I do think that they'll win by more than 31, though. I do, because the defense is going to absolutely smother South Carolina. It doesn't matter who's playing quarterback, whether it's the Zeb Nolan kid from Oconee County. And isn't it interesting that Oconee County, 10 miles away from Georgia, has 2 starting SEC quarterbacks? All we write about is the Southern Cal guys, and there's 2 guys from 10 miles from Athens that have been starting in the SEC. But I don't think it matters who's going to start at quarterback. If Kirby turns that junkyard dog defensive line loose, it doesn't matter who's back there. You're not escaping. They bring him in the stadium and they lock the gates, and they give them their paycheck for coming, and they don't let them out till the clock's on 0. So this is a game South Carolina needs to try to survive, keep key guys healthy, take their beating and move on. This is going to be ugly on Saturday.
I want to squeeze in one final thing before we let you go, Mike. First, let me remind folks, is our Georgia Farm Bureau practice report. And obviously, one of the things the Georgia Farm Bureau understands is that so many of the people who are watching and listening to us right now, they're working hard for a living, right? That means they got to get places, and nothing's more important to you that are kind of on the go each and every day than having a dependable vehicle. And of course, one of the things that's important for a dependable vehicle is having dependable insurance coverage for that vehicle. Well, that's one of the things that Georgia Farm Bureau has been doing since 1959, keeping its promises to its customers when it comes to the protection they need for the automobile that they call their own. You can find out a lot more about this yourself when you check out gfbinsurance.com. That's gfbinsurance.com. Find out about all the work that's done on this locally, whether it becomes like the claim adjusters or the folks that are kind of handling your policy, the person that's on the other end when you pick up the phone and dial it. That's what Georgia Farm Bureau provides for you. So check them out online at gfbinsurance.com. Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team. That can include your auto insurance there as well. Mike, we'll finish with this. Kirby Smart, pretty pointed remarks, really wants to see more from his offensive line right now. That's obviously a group that's in flux. You've got guys changing positions, some that may change positions again as we kind of move throughout the rest of the year. There's been some injury issues here. There's some young guys who are trying to work their way into the lineup. But one way or another, I think the impact we're seeing on this is right now Georgia's not really running the football at an elite clip. And, obviously the offensive line is a big part of that. And I know for me, one of the things I'm the most curious about going into Saturday, because I do think the one spot where South Carolina does have some talent is on its defensive line. Rick Sandage is banged up, but they still have some pretty good talent there with the defensive line. It's a pretty good test for the Georgia offensive line on Saturday to see if it can play better than it has played the last couple of weeks. I'm probably as interested in that on Saturday as I am anything.
Yeah, it is interesting. And, we'd heard that Broderick Jones needed to get stronger, and we saw why. He got pushed into the backfield a couple times by a UAB defender. And you'd like to think that Broderick Jones, as a 5-star, would be ready to handle that sort of physical challenge. But that's what's been keeping him out of the lineup, and you saw a little bit of that on Saturday. So hopefully he'll improve, again, his first extended action and a game like that. So hopefully he'll show some improvement. But it was disappointing because you've got some really good running backs. And, when they can't even get 2 steps without getting hit or boxed in, it's just like, wait a minute. Whatever happened to RBU? And let's face it, Sam Pittman's doing a great job at Arkansas. He's a special guy. And, I know that, we've all been encouraged at times by Coach Luke. But, what is this, year 2 for him now? So I don't think there's any reason why with 4- and 5-star players they shouldn't be performing at a better level. In terms of being able to knock teams like UAB back off the ball. I mean, I know UAB's a tough team. I mean, Kirby made them sound like the 66 Packers, but they shouldn't be beating you at the line of scrimmage, but they were. Now, they committed a lot to it, and as Kirby said, it was very expensive for them to stop the run game. Stetson Bennett had, 220 of his passing yards on 3 plays, but I think you bring up a great point. I think it'll be really interesting to watch moving forward. It's unfortunate that Tate Ratledge went down with an injury early. He was one of the better run blockers. And so now you've had to move some guys around. I don't think Warren Erickson played well at right guard. I'm not sure who should be the center. Van Prant was the higher-rated guy, but Erickson was the starter ahead of him for a reason, so let's keep an eye on that. I don't know when Amarius Mims will be ready. He is a monster, and he looks like a guy who has a high talent ceiling, but Warren McClendon is a guy that was a freshman All-American. I don't know where I'd line up Jamari Salyer, so I'm kind of talking in circles, but it's because we don't really know. I mean, I think we'd all just stand back and say, well, we don't really care. Just put something out there that works, doggone it. You got all this talent. How in the world can you have all this talent and get, pushed into the backfield on 3rd and 2? I mean, and then you got competition at running back. You haven't even brought that up yet. I mean, I'm not sure why James Cook is, he's a placeholder. I mean, one good play, but other than that, 4 carries for 4 yards. This is really, there's a lot of intense competition, I can tell you, for sure. I'm not speculating, letting you know that it's pretty real over there. And as real as South Carolina is as an opponent is a motivation, these guys are also being motivated to keep their jobs in these position rooms because you've recruited so well. And it's intense. And it's hot, and people want to be on the field. So stay tuned.
All right, Mike, good stuff. Thanks for being here as part of a Georgia Farm Bureau practice report here today. We'll look forward to reading it at DawgNation.com. I guess we'll see you Thursday for Cover 4 Live and a lot of stuff in between there as well. And we'll chat with you here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort again very soon, too.
Thanks, BA. Have a good one.
You too.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
A couple things I want to bring up on what Mike said there, and we mentioned this with Connor yesterday, that there is no doubt about it. The Georgia offensive line needs to play better, and there's no doubt about it that Matt Luke has a big spotlight on him because, Georgia probably had the best offensive line coach in the country as his predecessor there at that spot. But it is also revisionist history to say that the Georgia running back performance changed mightily when Pittman left and Luke stepped in. The truth is there was a little bit of regression for the Georgia running back position in 2019, the last year of Sam Pittman. That was an offensive line that included 2 future first-round picks at offensive tackle and an NFL-caliber starter there at the guard spot with Solomon Kindley. But in 2019, Georgia averaged a full yard per carry less than it averaged the previous 2 years in 2017, 2018. So there is a little bit of an issue for Georgia running the football that actually predates the arrival of Matt Luke. I'm not Matt Luke's agent. I'm not necessarily defending him on this because I think that the entire Georgia offensive line, clearly need to get better. Georgia needs to run the football better than it has through the first couple of games. But this is not one of those things of, Georgia was RBU when Sam Pittman was here, but the moment he left, that all changed. That actually started to change before Pittman left. They were running the ball less effectively in 2019 than they had in 17 and 18. And I think a lot of that was due to very conservative play calling and ineffective passing attack where opposing defenses just weren't put into conflict. They weren't forced to guess what Georgia was doing offensively. They knew Georgia was going to run it, and you had, big stacked boxes that was almost impossible even for NFL caliber offensive linemen to truly block, and so you saw some of that. So in other words, here is the thing that I'm hopeful for. Obviously, the challenge that's gone out for Georgia to play better offensively along the front is a part of this, but I'm also of the belief that as Georgia develops what is a little bit more of a dependable, potent passing attack, all of a sudden now opposing defenses do have to guess. I have every reason to believe that on Saturday, UAB was of the mindset of, you know what, let's just... if they're going to beat us, let us make them beat us through the air. And then Georgia did that. Georgia torched them with the passing game. But UAB had seen little of that. They'd seen enough of the other to assume that making Georgia try to throw the ball to beat them was probably a pretty good strategy. Well, now on South Carolina, now that South Carolina has seen what Stetson Bennett has done and seen what the Georgia offense has kind of done in the kind of Todd Monken era, are they forced to kind of play it a couple of different ways on Saturday? And does the Georgia running game kind of show up in a little bigger way on Saturday against the Gamecocks? The one place South Carolina does have some talent. Think about Zach Pickens. Think about guys like that. They got a little bit of talent there along the defensive line, so it's actually a pretty interesting battle between those two groups on Saturday. And then one more thing, and then we'll move on here and do our SEC through. The one thing that I can't have with the Daniels conversation is this idea of, they like the NBA, where there's 82-game regular season and they'll just be star players just chilling, just hanging out on the sidelines, dressed up in the suit. And the NBA, that's kind of considered load management, where we're managing the rest for a player, where we're dealing with some load management, not too much load on a player over the course of a long 82-game schedule. The college football regular season schedule is only 12 games. There is no load management in college football. And so, the idea that Daniels is not playing is not one of those things of, just give him rest because this doesn't matter. I mean, I can trust you. I can promise you. Daniels himself would want to play. George would want him to play. The fact that he's not playing is not easily explained away. And no matter how anybody on any side of that discussion tries to do so, Daniels' absence in the Georgia offense is not easily explained away. So with that said, we'll move on here. We'll do our SEC through just for a moment. Let me also shout out my friends at Finish Long Drink, because that goes great this time of year with whatever sport you're doing, whether you're watching the college guys on Saturday, the other guys on Sunday, or just hanging out during the week, getting ready for football again. Last night, the weather was so nice. A lot of you enjoy being outside this time of year. And the Finish Long Drink goes great with it, whether it's the Long Drink Cranberry, the Long Drink Zero, which is 0 carbs, 0 sugar, Long Drink Strong, 8.5% alcohol by volume, the traditional that has kind of like the grapefruit and gin kick all with it. It's an award-winning, ready-to-drink cocktail. It looks like a beer because it comes in a can, but it's not. You pop the top, you can pour it in a glass. That's what my wife likes to do. I like to drink it right out of the can. And it's just ready to drink right there. Not a lot of fuss, not a lot of effort, just good, enjoyable beverage with a nice liquor kick. that you don't have to do a lot of work to be able to enjoy. Get yourself some finished long drink today. In fact, go to thelongdrink.com and find out where you can pick some up. That's thelongdrink.com as our SEC through music comes to an end. I guess I went a little long there on some of the stuff with Georgia. So let me bounce through a couple of stories here real quick. I got to tell you, be very careful assuming that Alabama is a rubber stamp against Florida this upcoming weekend. Be very, very careful about that. We'll talk more about this as we get ready towards the tomorrow's show. We'll make our official picks on some of these games. Of course, go with the flow presented by R.S. Andrews on Friday. One thing to know, though, is Alabama's star pass rusher, best player on that defense, one of the best individual performers that Nick Saban's had in a number of years defensively, Will Anderson. His status currently unknown. He is dealing with an injury. His absence on Saturday could be a significant one for the Crimson Tide. It's a game that I already think adds up to the potential of Florida playing closer than I want them to as a Gator hater and closer than many expect them to. And Anderson's status on that, I think, only cements that possibility a little bit more. There was some interesting reporting around college football yesterday about a change that could be coming to the recruiting scene. I'll show you the tweet here from Ross Dellinger on the screen. Dellinger, a good one from Sports Illustrated, letting us know that the 25-man signing limit that's been in place for college football could be about to be increased. Here's what Dellinger puts on Twitter. Officials are set to pass a one-year waiver next month to immediately expand the 25-man football signing limit. He says coaches can replace up to 7 players who leave for the portal. The max signing number would be 32, which is 25 plus 7. So this is, as he said, kind of a one-year waiver in all of this. But these are the kinds of changes that I would like to see college football kind of make more permanent. And this, for me, believe it or not, is not really so much a story about what I think makes Georgia a better team on the field. I really do try to be concerned about the health of college football in general. And one of the things that concerned me about last year there's so much cheerleading by some of the national media for some of the changes that are occurring in college football that no one wants to pay attention to some of the negative consequences for that change. In other words, everybody loves transfer portal, at least the people who kind of report on this from kind of a national level. But what they don't really report is because of the transfer portal, because a lot of the programs at the group of 5 level were only looking to the transfer portal for player additions. They weren't really looking to the high school ranks. There was at least one school last year that didn't sign a high school player. And across the board, there were more than 100 fewer players out of high school that signed college scholarships in 2021 than had done so in 2020. That because of all this, the impact the transfer portal is having on college football, in addition to not always working out great for the guys who enter into it, but it's also creating less opportunities at the college level for guys coming out of high school. So to me, one of the ways to mitigate against that is give teams a chance to replace guys that leave their roster, but also just give teams a chance to sign more guys coming out of high school. I'm always going to be in favor of more guys out of high school having a chance to play college football. Not because it impacts my favorite team. Georgia's going to be good, I think, no matter what. But listen, I do these games on Friday night. I talk to the coaches. I talk to the players. I talk to guys who want to have a high school football dream. The idea that we could create a rule system and a financial structure that allows more players to play college football, that to me would be a very, very good thing. Let me I will also mention one more thing here for a moment. Sometimes in college football, I never quite know what's real and what's not. I hope this is real. I believe that it probably is. So Ole Miss is playing Tulane on Saturday, and we saw Tulane early in the season actually keep it pretty close against Oklahoma, right? And so this week when Lane Kiffin, the Ole Miss coach, was talking about his upcoming opponent Tulane, he said they're really an SEC opponent. Well, a lot of historians know that Tulane actually used to be an SEC team, and I believe this is real. I don't think this is like one of those social media like jokes. So here's Tulane's official football Twitter account. By the way, how much do you love that green wave logo for the for Tulane there? But I believe on the back of their helmet on Saturday, according to this photo that I'm looking at here, they're going to have a decal that says SEC champs 34, 39, and 49, the 3 years that Tulane won the SEC, which is actually more SEC championships than a good number of teams who are currently in the SEC, Mississippi State included, obviously the relatively new teams like South Carolina, A&M, teams like that. But 3 championships in its history for Tulane in the SEC, putting that decal on the back for a game against Ole Miss on Saturday, I think this is real. I hope it is, and I think it's a cool thing for Tulane to do. We'll make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort, one of the things that we talked about yesterday was, if you remember, I kind of used an old 80s movie to kind of help make my point on this. that even though Georgia's a gigantic point spread favorite on Saturday and doesn't typically always do great when favored by more than 30 points, on Saturday, I think the Dogs are pretty motivated to do pretty big beat down there on the Gamecocks. I made my case for that yesterday, and I kind of talked about the role that Oscar Delp plays in all of this, that you got South Carolina trying to be cute with its recruitment of Delp. Georgia's obviously pulling on all stops there as well to show Delp how much he's wanted by the University of Georgia. And I said the presence of Delp as just kind of a recruit kind of hanging in the balance here, that might motivate Georgia to make sure it scores enough points and shows off Brock Bowers and all the things that go along there. The other thing that I'm kind of thinking about for today is another reason. So let's remind you of the mindset that I think that Georgia's going to have going into Saturday. Remember the movie Karate Kid? Remember the bad guys in the movie Cobra Kai? A lot of you watch the series now on Netflix. Used to be on YouTube. But you remember the movie from the 80s and the very, very vicious attitude that Cobra Kai had back then. Let me give you a quick reminder of this right now. So we believe on Saturday, truly, Georgia might try to strike first, might try to strike hard, and actually show no mercy against South Carolina because it wants to impress Oscar Delp. Also because sometimes friends stick up for each other a little bit. Kirby Smart's friend, Will Muschamp, former South Carolina head coach, is now at UGA. And listen, Smart's going to do everything he can to downplay all of this and not make a big deal about it. And listen, I think a lot of South Carolina fans feel like they're very much justified in moving on from Muschamp. I'm sure Muschamp has a different side of the story. So just think about the fact that if you're Muschamp now working at Georgia, it'd be kind of enjoyable to see your new employer beat up on your old employer, and Kirby Smart doing a solid for his good friend there, Will Muschamp. I think that kind of factors into the no mercy attitude that Georgia may have against South Carolina on Saturday. Here is Kirby talking about Muschamp earlier in the week, essentially throwing water on any idea that the presence of Muschamp on the Georgia sideline matters at all.
We go through this all the time. We went through it with DK on Clemson. We go through it every year. Somebody changes spots. You guys write about it, make a big deal about it. And it's not that big a deal, really. He's not in their meetings. He doesn't know their game plan. He does know who their players are. And I just don't know how that helps you a lot. You know, we know what their height, weights, and we got the tape, and the tape speaks for itself. He just might know more about them in terms of what strengths and weaknesses there are.
So listen, I don't think it's a big thing. I think it's a little thing. The same way I don't think the Oscar Delp thing from yesterday is a big thing. I think it's a little thing. But sometimes a lot of little things add up together. And Smart may say, hey, listen, Will Muschamp doesn't matter in this game. But, you know, listen, these coaches are also human beings, and getting a little bit of retribution against your ex-employer, I wouldn't think that Kirby and Muschamp would be the first to necessarily do that. So striking first, striking hard, showing no mercy against South Carolina, that's kind of what I'm on guard for a little bit. And I'll give you a couple more reasons as we head throughout the rest of the week on that. For now, though, let's get ready to wrap up. We do our Gator Hater roll call. Our golden shoe is typically awarded for Gator hating, but our buddy Mad Dog today drops a good one. I don't know why I think this is so funny, but for those of you not watching in video, here's Smart in the suit holding a bucket of chicken with the South Carolina logo on it, and says, Mad Dog says, when someone asks what you're having for dinner Saturday night, I do love this from Mad Dog, and chomping down on some chicken. I believe you may see the Dogs do that on Saturday. By the way, speaking of October 30th, those lousy, stinking Gators, about 45 days from now for our Gator Hater Countdown. We will see all of you tomorrow for DawgNation Daily, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews Cooldown. Of course, R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. R.S. Andrews shows up on time. They do the work that's promised at the price that's promised. You can trust them to do all that for you today. All right, so yesterday we were a little bit short on comments. Today we have to be a little bit short on comments again, and we really will make this up at some point in time. But we've just had a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes as of late. So you can join us always at 9:45 for an extended comment section as a part of our First and 15 at DawgNation.com and the DawgNation app. But we will have to be a little short here on this. But we'll try to make those comments valuable. Coach Billy 12 says, ooh, this is some interesting intel. He says, don't be surprised sometime this year if Bowers throws the ball. He throws dimes. Listen, I wouldn't mind seeing that. That'd be a great thing to see. Good stuff there on that front. Let's check in on Facebook for a moment here, too, and see how the Facebook folks are doing here today. Hopefully having a good time and everything that goes along with that. Let's see if we can find. Here we go. On Facebook, Philip Jordan Wells says, fry them suckers up. Listen, I love fried chicken now. So I'm always like the kind of person that enjoys like the tailgate dinner, tailgate meal that's kind of somehow centered around Georgia's opponent. So it's like, some good fried chicken for a game against South Carolina, or a nice, smoked hog for a game against Arkansas. I don't even mind like a little gator tail before you play Florida. I like, you play LSU, you do like a low country boil. I kind of like the idea of a tailgate meal that's themed around your opponent. I also remember back when you used to have that Bojangles right across the street from Williams-Brice Stadium when I was a kid. I used to love that too, for sure. Matt Rukavina says, South Kakalaki better bring some olive oil this Saturday because they're going to get roasted for 60 minutes. That's good stuff. I like that. Frank White says, how about Bowers and Washington on the goal line? Good luck stopping that. For some reason, Frank's comment makes me think back to, the idea that you could put, those two great tight ends on the field in a goal line situation. Did you watch the Falcons on Sunday? Goal line situation. Don't even have Kyle Pitts in the game. Like, you could have drafted Justin Fields if you're not going to put Pitts in the game on a goal line situation. Like if you're going to draft a guy and not use him, why not draft a quarterback? At least let him, get ready to eventually become your starter. It was strange stuff. Lee Hayes says, tailgate fried chicken and a red shirt. Yeah, I guess I have seen there's a little bit of a call for a red out on Saturday. Ryan Matthews says you also have to have corn dogs for LSU, which is kind of an inside joke that some SEC fans get. Artist Medford said, when will we let Zamir White loose? White, what did he get? 7 carries on Saturday? He's getting as many carries as any Georgia running back is. I think the problem right now, though, is between Zeus and Kendall and maybe Kenny McIntosh to an extent. And I don't really know that you're really seeing any of those guys distinguishing themselves all that much. And obviously you hope to see somebody kind of step to the forefront because while, 7 carries aren't the same thing as 20 carries, it's also not an insignificant amount to really show that you need to get 10, right? It's like, maybe no Georgia running back's getting a chance to tote the rock as much as he might want, but they're all getting a chance to tote it enough to show what they're all about here. And right now, you don't really have guys breaking out of the pack from others. Donathan Henderson says, do the defense or special team score on Saturday? I think this defense is always a threat to score. And by the way, Kyrus Jackson, who is banged up, not able to play wide receiver, but doing a pretty good job punt returning, he's also been really close to taking him back to the house too as well. He's really showing a lot of spark there as a punt returner, even if he's not currently healthy for the lateral movement required for playing wide receiver. Over here on YouTube, Nature Gator says, Arthur Smith seems not know how to use Kyle Pitts. Boy, that's a scary thing to say. And Nature, you may be right about that, but like the thing that was kind of true of Arthur Smith going back to his time as offensive coordinator at Tennessee was that he was a head or at least a play caller that was very comfortable using tight ends. The whole thing for Sunday for the Falcons was really strange, really strange. A Jerry Dog fan says, I used to live beside a South Carolina tight ends family. I was friends with him on Facebook when he went live with the Hedges in their mouth celebrating. They cut their own switch that day. Yeah, I'm going to talk a bit more about this because, here's the way that I think that college football works. On the one hand, it's illogical that Georgia would use the 2019 game as too much motivation because the head coach that, was a part of all that is now working at Georgia. So, on the one hand, there's a lack of logic that says 2019 factors into this. But a lot of what happens behind the scenes in college football is not logical. And while Kirby Smart himself may not do do you remember what this team did to you in 2019? Smart himself might not do that. But that doesn't mean Scott Sinclair won't do that. Our buddy Mike Johnson, who played at Alabama, he would always tell me about how that was always Scott Cochran's role. There's a lot of stuff that Nick Saban just wasn't going to be saying, right? It's Saban's too dignified to kind of drum up some sort of emotional ploy, but he hired people to do that for him. It's kind of like the guy that hires the bodyguard to beat up somebody he doesn't want to get his hands dirty fighting. You hire the strength coach to say the things that you yourself maybe don't want to say. And so in the old days at Alabama, we've been told it was Scott Cochran who did that kind of stuff. Kirby Smart was coming of age as a coach during that time. So Smart may say, I won't say one thing about this South Carolina game from 2019. That's probably true. And that doesn't mean somebody won't be saying it, and my guess is Scott Sinclair probably is. And as nonsensical as it is to make a big deal about that when most of the players that are on Georgia maybe weren't playing in that game, a lot of the South Carolina players that played in that game are now gone. The head coach from South Carolina today is now switched to the other side. When it comes to motivational play, I mean, like the Georgia players only know what they know. They're so focused on their own task, they don't even remember the 2019 game. So you could tell them anything you want. I mean, like the one thing I'll always go back to is I will be convinced for the rest of my life that Georgia went into the Notre Dame game in 2017 believing somehow that Notre Dame had said something about Georgia. Because remember, you had like Dominic Sanders that day saying we're going to punish them from the start and all this kind of stuff. There was like a real edge to Georgia going into that game. And I think somehow the Georgia players had been convinced, at least this is my read on the situation. I think they'd been convinced that somehow Notre Dame thought it was better than Georgia, that somehow Georgia wasn't worthy of going into this hallowed stadium and winning a game like this. The truth is Notre Dame had been 4-8 the previous year. I think they were a little bit concerned about Georgia coming in, but the Georgia players were convinced otherwise, and so Georgia went out there and showed teeth for 60 minutes. And I think a similar thing may play out this upcoming Saturday. Rodney Hewitt says Muschamp can actually tell our guys what was being said in that locker room after that South Carolina game. I think Rodney brings a pretty good point about that. Brian McPhail asked about Julian Rochester. I think there's the numbers game that just kind of runs. You kind of get into an issue with this. There's just so many capable defensive linemen at Georgia right now. And we're going to get off the air here in about 1 minute. So many capable guys right now. Let's see what else. Let's see what else is going on. Some of you like Jerry and Matt Rukovian and others, man, y'all are not going to draw me off sides like that. You're not going to do it. I try to be pretty careful. Kevin Cook says in the classic Herschel Walker line about the ball not being heavy. Yeah, that's a great line. That's a great line about being able to tote it 40 times. Good stuff from Herschel on that. Nick Roundtree says we may not give up a touchdown the whole month of September. It's one of those things. It's kind of like the rushing touchdown streak that Georgia had for a while in 2019. I think fans were enjoying it. I think it made Kirby Smart a little bit uncomfortable. If Georgia goes much longer without giving up a touchdown, you better believe that at least an offensive touchdown, to the opposing offense, that's going to make Smart probably a little bit uncomfortable, but fans are going to eat it up. And I think this has a chance to grow some legs. I really do think this has a chance to grow some legs. All right, for now, though, we got to go, y'all, and I apologize. We'll try to do more comments tomorrow, but appreciate you being here for R.S. Andrews Cooldown. Y'all check out R.S. Andrews online for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. Your water heater, if it goes out, that's a disaster, right? Not with R.S. Andrews. In many cases, they can replace it for you the same day, but you got to find them online at rsandrews.com. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow, 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, 9:45 for our 1st and 15. We'll talk to you then, everybody.